Hey friends, welcome to the Canyon Pathways podcast, where we invite you to live like a son and lead like a father. Canyon Pathways is a global community of men on the journey from the striving of servanthood to the freedom of sonship as we traverse the canyon that is midlife leadership. My name is Noel Boucher, and I'm the founder and part of the leadership team for this venture, and I'll be your guide throughout this podcast as we explore and discover what it means to live like a son so we can lead like a compassionate father. Welcome to this episode of the podcast. Glad to be with you. Excited about what we're going to cover today in this episode. We got two types of episodes here at the CP Pod. The first one we call our Field Note episodes, where we look at one of our Field Note essays, a short essay looking at a word that we think embodies a concept that is central to this journey into sonship, to living like a son and leading like a father. The second type of episode is, like we got today, a conversation episode where we invite a Canyon Pathways brother from somewhere around the world to join us, sit with us, look further at this word, this concept that we're discussing, but also bring their story and their wisdom and their insight to bear, and in that way build up the CP community around the world. So grateful for that, and that's what we're going to do today. We've got Sherman Bradley sitting down with Patrick Rooney in London. Can't wait for that conversation. It's been an incredible journey with Patrick this year in 2025, coming to a retreat, walking through spiritual direction. Incredible brother. He's going to have insight into the field note topic we looked at in our last episode, which is on wealth. So just to recap, we looked at wealth, this topic that is one way or another important, central, essential to this journey in midlife leadership. We're going to be handling wealth or struggling with a lack thereof. Maybe didn't meet expectations. Maybe we're going through a crisis, cash crunch, business failure. Maybe we're going through a transaction where we are stewarding new wealth. Maybe we are inheriting from the previous generation. So wealth, whatever it is, whatever amount it is, whatever it looks like, however many zeros, however many properties, however many assets, whatever that base is, it's an important topic. So we looked at that in the field note, and we discovered a couple really interesting things. First of all, we looked at the idea that ultimately access is a clearer indicator of wealth than accumulation. We live in this consumer age, and it's always been this way, nothing new under the sun, where, who can have the most properties, the most things? Am I keeping up with the Joneses, whether that was 2,500 years ago or today in our culture? And we begin to focus on accumulation, whether that's accomplishments, again, asset base, a return, a marker of stewardship or achievement. But the real indicator of wealth is access. And we looked at that in an anecdote in the field note, that access is where we actually can step into wealth. And usually that is relational, an important thing, not just in our lives, our professional lives, our choices through this journey through midlife, but also into living like a son. We have access in this relationship, in this identity of being a son and heir. We don't as a servant, as an employee, as a slave. The elder sibling in Luke 15 didn't feel like he had access, hadn't worked hard enough, was still out in the field, and yet this younger brother comes home and he gets a feast and he gets a new ring and a robe and his sandals and all the markers of sonship, of inheritance, after all that he'd done to blow it. And here's this elder sibling out there saying, I still haven't accumulated enough goodwill, enough accomplishment, enough of my own resources and assets. And the father comes out and says, my son, everything I have is yours. You're a son. You're an heir. Through me, through the relationship with me, you have access. So that was a big finding. And we moved into the word itself, wealth, looking at its etymology. And we discovered wealth was not simply a marker of financial achievement or accumulation. Literally, it meant well-being. To be wealthy meant to be well. Later, the TH was added, just like our English word health, out of that Germanic root. So health, wealth, literally being well-being. And that well-being is not just financial. As important as financial security is, it's not just financial. It's relational. It's emotional. It is physical, maybe even intellectual, and definitely spiritual. That is what wealth is. So we looked at that and also discovered that as a son and heir, it we our wealth is defined not by hustle but by inheritance, and that's an important thing. And we have that access as a son, as one who can come boldly before the throne on which our Father sits, as a son, as a brother and friend of that first son, who was the first of many brothers. We now have access to that rest. So go back, listen to that field note, lots more insights that came out of it. But right now, we're jump to the conversation with Sherman and Patrick, listen to their wisdom and see what more they tease out of this and bring to bear this conversation. This is where the wealth is. This is what we discovered in the field note. It's in the multitude of relationships that we have. So these brothers are going to add more value to the discoveries we've already made. Let's jump to that conversation right now.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the community side of Canyon Pathways podcast, where we continue to develop the language of sonship one word at a time through one man at a time. And that man today is my brother, Patrick Rooney in the UK. How are you, Patrick?
I am wonderful. The sun is shining over here, which this time of year is not something we can count on.
That's for sure. Yeah. So Patrick is a husband, father of four, a man who's worn many hats. Let's just put it that way. But one of the hats that I appreciate is the collegiate athlete and the competitive man that I've come to know that he is, especially when we're out there tossing um
The
what
cornhole, the bags, yeah.
we're playing cornhole in Naivasha, Kenya, of all places. But yeah,
Yeah.
Patrick is also an entrepreneur, an investor, a business developer, and has spent the last 10 years with his family in his new home in the United Kingdom, a place I'd love to visit, spend some time there myself. So, Patrick, it's an honor to have you today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in. One of the interesting things that happens inside of Canyon through Noel, our founder of Canyon Pathways, is he likes to put out these field notes. And the field note for today is the word wealth, not just in a financial sense, but wealth of wisdom, faith, and even relational richness that grows as we live like sons. So, Patrick, when you hear the word wealth, what comes to mind for you?
You know, Sherman, it's been a complex thing for me over the years where I've always worked in financial services and, there's this kind of initial thought of wealth when you're a kid of, being able to have a Ferrari and, a 6 or a 7-bedroom house or whatever the case may be. And, as you kind of grow and become more mature, hopefully, there's the kind of changing of that definition. And for me, it's been massive. I think I'm still, I hope by many people's standards, a young man at 36, but uh, you know, I'm still in that kind of phase of really understanding the true meaning of the word and the way that, as kind of sons of the Father, we can live into the different types of wealth. I think looking at health, at relationships, at all of the gifts that we're given, the kind of less and less I equate it with actual monetary value, as strange as that may seem.
It's not strange. Quite frankly, well, it may be strange for many, but not strange for us. And when we think of it beyond the monetary means, it really challenges us to spread our thoughts as to how it really transfers into faith and family, for instance. So, how would your understanding of wealth grow? How has it grown when it comes to thinking through it connected to faith and family?
Yeah, I think to probably just dive straight into the connection to Canyon Pathways. Um, I've kind of lived under this guise. I grew up in the Midwest and had always understood and been taught that, as a man, you take care of your family, you go to work every day. I remember my dad saying it's called work, not play, you know? and
Okay.
and you kind of want to build this kind of insulation around yourself and your family to be able to overcome whatever may come your way, right?
Right.
And I think for a lot of people that means primarily, building up enough capital to be able to deal with, sickness or loss of job or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And in reality, I've kind of come to realize that, investing my time with my family, with my wife, and with my children yields so much more substantial results than spending an extra hour sitting in my computer working, right?
Right.
And I think that has been a pretty monumental shift for me. Uh, you know, Frankly, what really sped that along was COVID. Um, because for me, I'm someone who's, uh, over the course of the years, I've ranged between being gone 4 days a week to 2 days a week to, maybe 10 days a month and sporadically. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, now you're home for 9 months nonstop.
Wow. Yeah. That had to be a shock for everybody, not just for you.
Yeah, yeah. I think the first, and I'm sure many people had a similar type of response. The first 2 or 3 months, like, oh, but this is amazing. I get to be with my kids all day, every day. And then after a couple months, you said, I'm with my kids all day, every day. Right.
Yes. And you have 4.
Yeah. And at that time they were what were they? That would have been about 5. So they would have been 9, 9, 7, and 5. So certainly ages where they need to release some energy, and
Yes.
we didn't have that much ability to do so.
Yes. Ooh, sounds like a learning experience in fatherhood.
Hmm. Patience, if nothing else.
Patience, if nothing else. One of the interesting things I found as I was looking up the word wealth, I know the typical definition, but I was curious as to what else was in there. And at the very bottom of all the various definitions, it has the word obsolete, and then it has
Hmm.
next to it happiness.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. So somebody has finally figured out wealth doesn't automatically equate with happiness.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world that I operate in, um, I forget who it might have been. C.S. Lewis. It just said kind of comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Yes.
Where in my world and by most people's standards, I'm well off by financially speaking. But when you look at on a relative basis, because I'm often with billionaires or multimillionaires or centimillionaires, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I like his watch, I like his car, I like his house, right? And I kind of took a little while to say, you know what? None of these men and women that I meet are happy or more fulfilled, and sadly, oftentimes I think there's a pretty high correlation with people being more unhappy. When you can have anything you want materially, it makes it that much harder to really see what God has for you. And when when you're not in the midst of despair crying out for the Lord, I think it makes it that much harder to really see the need. And I think it's a sad it's a sad reality that, so many of the people that I do know that fall in that uber wealthy category are oftentimes not the people leading our churches and giving away all their money and things like this.
Yes, it is a conundrum for many as I've had the pleasure of experiencing a few in the category that you mentioned from just a wealth standpoint and the pursuit of peace and joy that's elusive is quite perplexing for them when they have the means to buy whatever they want or go wherever they choose and do almost whatever they want to do.
Mhm.
And it's just a really challenging place. And I'm curious. So we look at this from the lens of faith and family, but then there is what we learned in Canyon through the lens of sonship. And I think of sons who don't yet know Christ. But for you, as a son who does know Christ, how has wealth played into sonship?
Yeah, I think the way that being totally honest with you, Sherman, like sonship was not really a um something that was a priority for me, that was top of mind, that was taught. And to digress, I mean, I grew up in Wheaton, Illinois, which some listeners may know. I'm sure some listeners went to university there. It's kind of the trivial pursuit answer of the most churches per person in America, right? And I grew up in that kind of background, and yet I feel like so many of these crucial biblical elements eluded me for my whole life.
Mm,
And
mm.
it's not until I have a friend in England who tells me when I'm on gardening leave between jobs, which again, for many Americans, like, what is gardening leave? Who is this guy? Um, they force you to take time off between jobs in England, just so everyone is with me.
Yeah,
Um,
which is a
but
beautiful thing that needs to be transferred to the US.
it should, yeah, yeah. No, it's great. I mean, if there's two things I'd say would be great for the U.S., it would be the European holidays and things like that. uh, and I go back to my time when we had children. I know it's changed now, but we would get 2 days off for paternity leave. So I got a grand total of 8 days off work for my four children. Anyhow,
Yeah.
going back to the point. so so with sonship, I think that was something where sometimes things are so blatantly obvious when you look back, and I think I've always described my relationship with the father as like I look back and I realize how many times I'm being smacked in the face with something that's so obvious looking back, but in the time you're kind of like, oh, what was that? Did something just hit me? And this whole rest and sonship was so prudent for me at this juncture in my life. And the the very simple epitaph that you guys gave, which is uh, you know, essentially you need to rest in order to receive. I'd never even conceived, and it was such a fundamental thing for me. And I just think, as soon as we started heading out of Naivasha, I just immediately was thinking how many guys would benefit from this retreat, because it's honestly, I hate using cliche words, but like it was a transformative experience just to simplify into these very basic yet powerful concepts that really had a huge impact on me. So with your question on sonship and wealth, um, I think there's just new things that I find myself unlocking every time I'm spending time with the Lord. So, I think it's one of these paradoxes where, you think to yourself, "Oh, if I want to do better financially, which will increase my wealth, I need to spend an extra hour a day, an extra 2 hours a day." In reality, what I've found is when I spend an extra hour with the Lord, random quote unquote things happen for
Yes.
for the better, right?
Yeah.
And it's so hard to then go to your boss and be like, "Oh, how did this come about?" You're like, "Well, I was praying," you know? He kind of looks at you like you're a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but hopefully it leads somewhere good. And I think like there are just so many different things where my twin boys are now 13, and one of the things that we've been going over recently, which I absolutely love, and I'm sure some guys with their sons have probably done the same, but there's the John Tyson journey into manhood, where he kind of writes out this edict of what he did with his sons from 13 to 20. Um, and it's fascinating and so eye-opening to think, hey, my father was a wonderful father, and I want to be a better father for my children, right? And I think all of us do. And
Yes.
then no matter how well we do, we pale in comparison to the way that our Father loves us, right? Our heavenly Father.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and that kind of rest of, again, I love the wording you guys used of rather than thinking in terms of an employee, and more of a son, more of a, I think when Noel brought that up in Naivasha was around the prodigal son story. Um, but yeah, it was just such a beautiful and simple way of thinking about it that it is a very, very different stance of being, this is my father, and I know that I have this, whether I've earned it or not, versus if I do this, I'll get this. If I just do a little bit better, if I just work a little bit harder, if I just can do one more thing, then maybe I'll get there. And I think that is so pervasive in every element of our society today that it's hard to counter that. And the refreshment of Canyon was so amazing for me.
Yes, that's good stuff. Now, if you're listening for the first time, Canyon Pathways retreats are happening around the world. And it's a wonderful opportunity for men, some midlife, some pre midlife, some post midlife, coming together for 4 days and really resting, attempting for some and mastering for others this process of rest to receive. Because our goal is to live like sons in order to lead like fathers. And in order to do so, we have to rest at the feet of the Father. That's where we learn fatherhood. That's how we learn to be a good son. And coming together, what Patrick is inviting us to understand is that there is a real purpose to the Sabbath. God rested on the seventh day as good measure for us to learn why he created the day for us so we can rest because we get to receive. And in that process of receiving, we have far more wisdom for the next week's journey than all of the striving that we do in our own capacity. And so when I think about your experience, and we were out in Naivasha, which is in what, like an hour or so, a little maybe an hour and a half outside of Nairobi, Kenya. This past summer, we had an awesome time. And each time you come to a canyon retreat, you get a word. And when I mean a word, a literal one word that Noel gives all of us. And your word was route. That's an interesting word for a man who's lived in multiple countries, worn multiple hats, and traveled to many different paths and places. So, what did that word mean to you when you first heard it?
The funny thing was the first thing I thought about was uh just the British and American, there's funny stuff. In America it's route, right?
Yes.
So I've always said route, and then in England it's route.
Root. Yeah.
It's a route. And so when I say route, I still get dirty looks in England. Because, they're like, you've lived here for 10 years. Can't you say the words our way? Uh, I said, no, sorry. But yeah, no, so it was funny because Noel and I had an initial chat before going, and of course, because we both played college football, we ended up talking about football a little bit. And so initially I kind of thought, hey, he's really leaning into the football element. Like, okay, that's cool. I was like, it's totally honest. I was like, maybe it's a bit, stereotypical, like Pat's a jock, right? but but then the funniest thing was like it immediately hit me because he added the verse, and the verse was about it was Matthew 2:12, and it was about the Magi, the wise men, going a different route or route, depending where you're listening, home, right? And it was to avoid being killed. And I had not once said to him, and I've spoken to so few people about the fact that the way that I've always felt God speaking to me has been in my dreams. And that verse was, talking about the Lord coming in a dream. And I was like, man, okay, so this is definitely not stereotypical. This is a man who has a gift, and who clearly hears from the Lord, because it spoke straight to the heart of me. Um,
Nice.
and and the other thing was, the route element was something that is it's a very broad word, because it you kind of think like, okay, what's your route to getting from A to B, right? I think that's kind of
Yeah.
the most common thing.
Right,
And then
right.
you also think in football, like, okay, you run a route. I played wide receiver, I played free safety, and so you have your route, and you run your route. And the more Noel and I talked about it, he was like, I really see this as an option route for you, like this point in your life, right? And
Yeah.
it was such a kind of funnily profound, because we kind of went full circle on it. Like, okay, football, directly speaking from God, back to football, and then using that. And I think, uh, I've kind of spent different periods of my life either running away from things or running to things, for
Mm,
better or for worse.
okay.
And the idea of an option route, where Noel said, like, I've been praying more about it, and I think you can, to use the football terminology, you can turn around for the hitch and you're
Yeah.
going to catch it. You can run over the middle for the post and you're going to catch it, or you can cut it for an out and you're going to catch it.
Right,
And
right.
he's kind of saying God is with you in your different paths, whichever way you kind of go. But the route is set for you. And yeah, again, it was just one of those things where it was kind of smack across the face in a good way. Uh to say, that he's on your side and he's with you and you are a son, and you know, rest in that. And that was a huge thing for me. And then I know we've talked about it, but subsequently, I normally will get like I don't know, call it a once every 2 weeks, I'll get some sort of dream, and it'll be varying degrees of weird. And the first night, I'm like, "Oh, I had this weird dream, guys," and subsequently, I had 3 nights in a row of very powerful and direct dreams that helped me determine the route that I went with the job that I ended up choosing as soon as I got back. Can't make that up.
No, no, not at all.
The veil is thin in Naivasha.
Yes, it is. It really is. We have found that to be true for many. So, with that, let's carry that a step further. So, how does the word route now play into your future?
Yeah, I think the optionality is really the thing I've held on to. That's something where I kind of feel that safety, I guess, of having a background where, you know, I've made mistakes, I've done things I shouldn't have, all of that. And now we're here where we are. And I know, as long as I'm looking to the Lord, and as long as I'm uh, you know, seeking him, that I can go whichever direction is the one that I feel like he's guiding me.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like I was so often either making the wrong decision, or should we be moving back to America? Should we go somewhere else? And I just feel this considerably greater sense of peace around uh, the kind of direction of where my life and our family are heading, since getting that word, um, which again may seem a bit silly, but I really found it to be quite powerful for me, having that kind of spoken over me, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not silly at all. And I heard a message a while back that talked about the power of the Garden of Eden and the plentifulness that was made available in the garden. It had four streams that came from it, and
Mm.
streams represented growth and plentifulness, and that God isn't as rigid as we often make him out to be when we want a definitive black and white answer. Sometimes he's telling us to play instead of work, and means
Mhm.
asking us to choose. He's giving us insight and wisdom into who he is, no differently than we would do with our own children. Hopefully, we don't want to carve out a direct path for them. We want them to find a place that they can play, where they go to work is something they enjoy so much it never feels like work. And it fits them, it suits them because it's what they're gifted and talented and then called to do. And I think what you are describing is beautiful. And more of us probably need to take some of the rigidity off of our decision making and trust that God is going to guide us and that there are multiple options sometimes for us to take where God will continue to bless us as his children. And so when I think about Canyon, my next thought is who invited you? How did you wind up at a Canyon retreat?
Yeah, so I was invited by a, a a thoroughly British and wonderful man named Tim Watkin, and he was actually a good friend of one of my good friends. So actually, on the second time I ever connected with him, he told me, he's like, "Hey, by the way, if you'd be interested, you should check this out. I think with where you're at in your life, this would be a good idea for you." And I'm like, "All right, cool." So I check it out, and he connects me with Noel via email, and the rest is history. So
Rest
yeah,
the street.
he went to the one in Greece, I think 2 years prior.
Yes, I
Um,
actually got to meet Tim.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's a wonderful guy, and it's a small world, I think. And if you're a somewhat professed Christian within the financial industry in London, it's not a huge circle. So, uh, it was something where we kind of, after meeting twice, we realized we had about 10 mutual friends, which is nice.
Ah, that is cool. That is cool. So, what were you expecting when you arrived at the retreat, and what surprised you most?
This is one of my things, and my wife would make fun of me. Probably my kids would too, but I don't like to be caught out with improper clothing, right?
Okay.
so 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 having no idea what we're doing, I brought a lot of workout stuff. I brought a lot of, maybe we need some nice slacks, who knows? So I feel like I had obviously way too many clothes. I could have
Yeah.
worn probably the same clothes every day. Uh, but really what he had told me was, I think, part of the, almost like Fight Club. Like, first rule is you don't talk about Fight Club. Uh,
Right.
and so there wasn't there wasn't much detail given, to say the least. But because I'm very, I'm kind of like an ENFP, go with the flow guy. I'm happy and I'm open to new experiences. And my anticipation was simply to be with a group of guys that, I think Tim said it's very life giving. I was like, hey, I'm up for taking life. So yeah, no, I mean, I had very little, and because I didn't know anybody else, I had the hour call with Noel. Tim told me about 3 sentences about it, and I think intentionally wasn't given much detail one way or the other, and I think going in like that without knowing anyone who'd been other than Tim, and having a very very brief overview, it it left me totally open to the experience in itself. You know,
What surprised you the most once you got settled in that first day?
the thing that surprised me the most by far was that there was not a prescription of, hey, we're doing this every 5 minutes of the day until you leave. Because I think, no shade to all the other Christian organizations and retreats, but this just doesn't exist.
Right.
so that was like that was a big thing. And my wife's like, I get back, what did you do? "Oh, just a lot of resting," and and she's like, "Huh? Yeah." And
Right.
but yet so many, and it's funny because like people in our church here in England had even recently gone up to them and be like, something's different about Patrick, and I'm like, oh well, that's good. If it's some sort of noticeable difference to people who I'm not spending every day with, I think that's proof in the pudding. And yeah, I mean that unstructured, hey, go do whatever you want to do to come close to God was that was wonderful. I mean, it was I've never had that um kind of indirect guidance that I found quite giving that freedom in that space to do it however you felt was best for you was very refreshing and unique.
Yes, it is truly a retreat. It is
Yes.
to rest and receive. As Noah would put it, there are guardrails. There are no. It's not a frame that we're going to put you in, but there are guardrails, and so we do come together and gather our thoughts about specific questions relating to sonship and fatherhood. Because, as you just described, I've not met one person yet who has said, "Oh, yeah, I've been fully developed in sonship, and this was just refreshing." No, they've all been like, "Sonship,"
Yeah.
especially when we were in Africa. Sonship.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a servant of God. No, you're actually, yes, a son now, and we unpack that in ways that aren't didactic in the learning model. It's really about discussion and spending time alone and away with God with these very simple questions about our identity and how we've wrapped it in things that don't add the kind of value that our hearts are really longing for. And so we
Yeah.
get to settle in out there in no man's land.
And that I think that servant nature, obviously there's a heck of a lot that's amazing about that. We're called to serve people as well, but there is that odd binary thought, I think, in so many Christians' view that if you're not serving, if you're not doing one extra thing, you're not serving the Lord. And then I always think of the Jesus in the house with Mary and Martha, and who's does he want you to keep cleaning? No. I try to use that in the kitchen with my wife, and
Yeah, that's a discussion for another time.
it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
So, what I'm hearing is that your understanding of sonship really didn't come to mind until you went to the retreat. Now, post retreat, how are you viewing sonship now? How is it playing itself out in your life?
It's almost like a s- supernatural is not the right word. Maybe it is of acceptance, where you say, hey, if I can have this foundation and truly have that foundation, not just say it or I read it on a bumper sticker that kind of says like, hey, Jesus died for me, and I have this firm foundation on the fact that I don't nothing I do or say is going to bring me any closer to the Lord. Um, is it's truly makes me think of what I'm doing, how I'm spending my time, and who I'm spending it with dramatically different. Um, I think I've really tried to dig in and spend more time with my sons and my daughters and my wife, and even going back to like my men's group at the church that I'm in. You know, uh, I guess being more challenging in saying like, "Hey guys, like we gotta look at this hamster wheel that so many of us are on and think, is this what we're meant to be doing as a group of men in this church?" And I think there's a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah.
When you got bills to pay and mouths to feed, that it's hard to not think, well, more output or more input means more output.
Yeah.
Um, which it, in this instance, I don't think it does. And so trying to really step into that sonship it's not easy because it's not something that comes natural. I think
Correct.
to most guys, it doesn't come natural. Like,
Mm.
I think it's hard to dissociate the laziness and rest, right? Because it's it's so deeply ingrained that
Yes.
like you slept for 9 hours. What do you mean?
What do you mean you didn't have a computer out there?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And look, and to be totally honest, I mean, me not not having a job that in the back of my mind at that point, it was something where I I know I was able to be far more present than I probably would have 4 or 5 months prior because, that's still something that I think is always niggling in the back of our minds
Yeah. Yeah.
when we have other things that we prioritize, dare I say idolize.
Right.
Uh and so I think thankfully I was able to go at a moment in my life where I had that ability to truly uh turn off, so to speak, from the rest of the world. That obviously is hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're built for striving. We have had our indoctrination into if you don't work, you don't eat.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you're lazy, you don't deserve anything. And this notion of a Sabbath's rest to rejuvenate, to receive, even though it's scriptural, it's in there.
Mhm.
I'm a pastor and I struggle with it at times. So I know we've not done a good enough job from the pulpit because we haven't mastered it ourselves.
Yeah.
This has enlightened us in ways that I'm hearing your direction going forward, the route you're on now
Mm.
has this infused into it. I'm wondering, what has that done for fatherhood for you? You have 4 children, 2 boys, 2
Mhm.
twin boys. How are you viewing fatherhood now?
I think it's I mean, look, I've never not thought of it to use a double negative. I've never not thought of it as a big priority for me, but I think the way in which I'm going about trying to instill different values, and the way I grew up versus the way other people grew up may have been different, but like, my dad was very steadfast. He was very kind of set in his ways, and I always knew I could count on him, and I knew he would be there. I knew he would do whatever he said he was going to do. um, you know, you don't buy new cars because that's dumb, right? Like it's just very. There was never an alteration in his viewpoint on really anything, which for many things is great. And you look at child psychology, having stability is amazing, right? Um, but for as a result, I've kind of come out as the total opposite. Um, and so for me, really, the thing I've always struggled with providing very well, I think, to my wife and my children is consistency, day in and day out about the little things. That's kind of what I struggle with,
Okay.
and I've always felt like that is um a deficiency. I felt like that's a something's wrong with me. Like why can't I want to wake up every day, clean the whole house, and remember everything on 6 different schedules, and like I'm like I know I know I have a high output with a lot of things, but I'm terrible at multitasking, and
Yeah.
you know anyhow, with my kids, it's like I think recognizing how uniquely and wonderfully made all 4 of them are, and really trying to help them. Like I think that the way you just said it earlier was beautiful, that you don't want to cut 4 paths for them. You want to maybe give them the tools to put into their tool belt to be able to find their own path, right? And you want to be able to enable them to do the things that will help them live as close to the Lord as they can. And
Yes.
not get in his way, not get in their way. Um, and that again, I just find it very challenging to not do things in a systematic and prescribed way.
Yeah.
And I think this is a real challenge because when you think about to me, the essence of Canyon, a lot of it is understanding through the reaction of where God places you, who God places in your life, the path that is then created for you, and taking that into account along with the gifts that you've been given and then capitalizing on those. And that means for me, I like to do a different thing every day. I would love to never go to the same office, which when you work from home all the time is interesting. um, but yeah, I mean, I think as a father, it's really made me perk up to the fact that, while I would love to be able to say, yeah, we've been crushing it with our daily
Mhm.
45-minute Bible study with each child. It's just not possible right now. Because they each need their own. One day, one of them is going to need to be encouraged, and the other one's going to need to be challenged, and the other one's going to need to be corrected, and the other one's going to need to be loved.
Yes.
Um, and so, I guess just trying to humbly seek out that that way of finding uh what's best for them as often as I can is for me hopefully reflecting that gift of rest in order to receive and therefore not deflect but to pass on to them. um and hopefully they see the change and the contemplation and the effect that has. And I would love if they said, "Ed, when we were in 2025, like something really changed with you and for the better." I like that, that because that's how I feel, and that's what I would love for them to see. But what's in my head and what comes out of my mouth sometimes are not the same. So,
Yeah, happens to the best of us, right? For sure. Is there anything I know we probably tapped into this question, but I wanna ask it again. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you did not expect to receive or learn that is, going forward with you?
um, yeah, I mean, there were quite a few maybe not changes, but um, outcomes for me. I think the the rest was the biggest by far.
Yeah.
Just truly resting. Um, the next biggest revelation for me would have been the uh, I think that equation of saying, "Hey, if you're not in a restful place, it's really hard to even focus in order to do anything well, let alone receive the words of God." Um, I think also with some further discussion with yourself and with Noel, it's also come to point that a lot of the various things that I was alluding to earlier of, what makes me me and what makes me tick, and which I may have seen as, weaknesses or deficiencies or whatever the case may be. These are the things which are truly what makes me a son of God and what makes me unique. And I think when you can kind of truly live into that and accept your wiring, so to speak, and not to use it as an excuse for things that you don't do well or to not try or whatever, but really find that beautiful balance, which I think is very inclusive of rest. Um, so I think there were a lot of little minute things, interacting with a lot of the guys from Kenya, and you guys from the US. It definitely kind of recentered me in a massive way for the second half of this year. And, I have not felt so full from a kind of spiritual and emotional standpoint for this amount of time, which goes back what 5 months now,
Yeah.
um, that I can remember.
Yeah. That is awesome. That is really awesome. Now, there's one aspect I got to ask you about. So we talked about sonship and being a son of a father and being a father to sons. But how has this sonship affected you being a husband?
Yeah, so I think the with my wife, I think the whole, call me crazy, but men are from Mars and women are from Venus is very true.
Very true.
Um, and having two daughters and a wife, I feel like it's furthered me along that viewpoint. But uh and my wife and I are also like on the various personality tests, we're polar opposites, right? So um we think about the world in a very, very different way. And I think I've really tried to take the time to uh, reflect upon the way that she looks at different things. Which, to me, it's like, well, that's totally illogical, right? Because we're wired different. We think differently. And so, I kind of sit there and say, you know what, let's pause that judgmental response, Patrick, and let's take a breath and think about why she's either reacting that way or thinking that way or proposing this thing or whatever it is. um and I think it's meant having that kind of momentary reflection as often as I can try to be uh um proactive with it has meant a lot of positive movement in the way that we interact. And also, I think I think Noel also mentioned as we were leaving, you may have said something too that, it's like, hey, just don't expect the rest of the world to be how this was, right?
Right.
D- don't expect to go back to a world of rest, right? And I think that was like, oh yeah, oof, you're right, because it was kind of I land on a Saturday morning and daddy, 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 and so it's right back into the thick of things. But yeah, with my wife, I think the hopefully she's experiencing these positive changes in the same way if you were to interview her. But um, I think there's been a significant uh a significant positive trend in the way that we're kind of trying to foster the children and their hearts and minds as well as our relationship and making it a whole, date your wife starting over from square one kind of thing.
Yes, the Venus and Mars resonates well. And you're not alone. My wife and I are on the total opposite ends of the spectrum and personality as well.
Right.
The other thing I want to talk about here that I appreciate about you is the competitive nature, the discipline, and but yet the transformation that has happened. Now, you mentioned being a collegiate athlete, which always puts us in this category of being competitive individuals. But you've had some significant injuries you've had to tackle as well. Yet here you are at 36, still as competitive as ever because you've put your body under, let's just say, some grueling task. Why don't you enlighten our viewers to how you weathered some really important physical storms?
Looking back on it, I mean, at the time as a 20-year-old, uh, and it actually this would be quite relevant. Hopefully, no one saw it live, but if you look at what happened to Cam Scatterbo on the Giants, that's exactly what happened to my ankle.
Really?
Um, yeah, so literally the identical break he just had is what I had. And it was nasty, right? And I'm not as tough as him, so I wasn't trying to walk off. I was crying, right? so 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 he's definitely much, built different than me.
Yeah.
But that was something that was really tough to deal with because at the time, sadly, it was the third day of camp going into my senior year. And so it's kind of the precipice of all those years of hard work that,
Absolutely.
to get where you are, and all the things you've fought for and sweat for, and, blah, blah, blah. And having that cut short, right? And it was really tough to deal with. And I would say um I did not handle it well at the time. It also didn't help that, where where I went to school, the athletes would go to school before the rest of the students. And so there was no one there in my football fraternity except for other football players, right? And, so as a result, I was kind of left on my own, to my own devices, with a freshly broken ankle. So I felt particularly alone in this moment as a young man. And so that was something that was really challenging for me. But in retrospect, God does everything for a reason. And I think
Yes.
I stand I can well, I sit here now. I was gonna say I stand here now. I sit here now. Uh and I can play sports, I can run, I can do all these things. I have no cartilage in my ankle and it hurts, but it's okay. It's life. Um and my reality is that I was, as a 20-year-old young man, I was not doing the things that God had called me to. I was not living the life that I should have been. I was not, um, seeking out the right things. I was the guy. I was like, I want to be the big man on campus. I want to do the things that get me to the NFL. And that's not, reading the Bible and praying and, being nice to people. This is getting what's mine. This is, I've worked for this, and I'm going to go get mine. And, I without a shadow of a doubt know that if that hadn't happened to my ankle, it would have taken so much longer for me to come to the realization that that guy is not the guy that I want or should be,
It should
you
be.
know?
Wow.
Um, and so in the kind of 2, 3 years afterwards, if you asked me that same question, I would not have had the same answer. But now that I'm 16 years out, I can say that with confidence. And I think, you know, it's been easy for me over the years to do those striving Christianese things, right? Where it's like, oh, I can read the Bible in a year. I can wake up at 5:30. I can, that's no problem. Uh, I love the trash talking of like, I woke up too early for you to score on me. and and so that striving element, again, I think was something I had to unpack, which was from that athletic career.
Yes.
Um, and I think the discipline obviously is great for most things in life, but when it's applied toward, oh, if I do this, I'll get this, then it doesn't always really bring you into the right light.
Yes. So true. So true. Unfortunately, you've learned this at the half stage, versus I know some they're well into my years before that revelation actually even hits. So
Mm.
I applaud you for that. I'm grateful for the revelation for you. It will definitely help you moving forward. Now let's move from athletics to career and calling, because you built a successful career in business development and investments, and you studied at the London School of Business in the UK. What inspired you to go into finance?
It was something where my dad also was in finance. And, I think it's funny because I look back, and my dad was in finance and my mom was an art teacher. And
Oh,
I kind of have 50-50, right? So
nice.
I'm quite artistic. But, after about 15, that kind of came to a halt up until recently. And I've kind of rediscovered that, which has been great and very therapeutic. Um, but, you know, at the time when I was in high school, I actually wanted to be an architect. And, I think that was something where I've always had a just, I don't know, a bit of a wonderment around beautiful buildings. And I'm from outside of Chicago, and I've traveled all over the world with work. I would still say Chicago architecture is the prettiest, most visually pleasing architecture in the world. You can call me crazy.
Interesting.
Um, but that said, I think at the time when I was going to school, I thought, well, it's really tough to become in the architectural world to get to a place where, you're really in the top, I don't know, half a percent where people know who you are and they pay you a heck of a lot of money to design things. And, I thought, whereas in finance, you can always kind of grind it out to do very well financially. And I think from coming from a pretty affluent suburb of Chicago, that was just something that was kind of part and parcel with the life of kind of safety and of relative ease, I guess, was, you're supposed to, as I said earlier, like, you're supposed to take care of your family, you're supposed to be able to do these things. And I looked at it like, okay, well, if I have the ability to go to a good university and get a good degree, I should be I should be kind of making sure that that pays off, right? And
Yeah.
and so I to be quite honest with you, I purely went into it for the money, right? I just I I that was a very long-winded answer. To say I could have just said money. Um, but as an 18-year-old, it was kind of like, well, I want to make the NFL, and if I don't make the NFL, I want to make as much money as I can. So that was the decision. I've stuck with it because, and one of the things actually most recently that has come to bear in terms of calling, because I've always struggled with this, where since I've kind of dug into my faith, selling a hedge fund, right, is which is what I do. It's
Mhm.
it's it's something where you you don't necessarily feel like I'm progressing the Lord's kingdom, right? I just feel like, oh, I'm just making more rich people richer, And that was something that took a while grappling with to realize, what? I actually come into contact with thousands of people on a annual basis all over the world. And if I can live and work under the principles of seeking the way that Jesus lived, then who knows who I'm going to affect and how. And sometimes that means I'm directly sharing my story of faith from time to time. Sometimes it's just not really talking about business as much as you would anticipate in a meeting. Sometimes, it's just really being a sounding board for someone who's in a tough place. Um, despite the fact that, like we've said earlier, they have all the money in the world at
Mm.
times. But you can see it on their faces that something's hurting. And so I've really come full circle on that, where I can utilize this role that I have and really be impactful with a lot of people all over the place.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm excited for you and what that's going to do moving forward as you plant these seeds and inspire and encourage men and women who have means to there these you never know where these seeds will germinate and what they'll produce going forward. And our responsibility is just to drop the seeds, to plant the seeds, to continue to shine that light and be a salt to the earth. So that's going to be an exciting path going forward. There'll be many stories to tell as well. How do you then define stewardship and wealth now that you uh, are adding faith to your career? I'm
Mm.
curious as to what's transitioning for you going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I think about more and more often, where um, at times it feels like I spend every waking hour outside of those dedicated to my work and to my family, uh, kind of on calls with people and helping, giving advice around certain things regarding, the strategy of bringing a product to market, or helping somebody in a career decision, or connecting some young man or woman with someone who's more seasoned in the industry, or
Mm,
whatever the case may be. Um, and I think looking at the intersection of the kind of, purely, uh, so to speak, like Christian world of, you know, having let's say the church on the one hand, and the business world over here, and really finding a lot more strings of tying these different pieces together for me,
mm,
um, has been something where I feel like it's a very, I don't know, ethereal way of thinking of stewardship. But
mm,
I think looking at the whole picture of the world that I live in and the people that I interact with, and utilizing that to the fullest of my capability to really connect people where it matters,
mm,
I think is one of the ways that I can steward what's been given to me, which I don't know. I think it's very different from just thinking, "Oh, okay, I want to make sure that, I set up a trust for my children, or I want to, tithe and things like that." But rather almost a stewardship of time and effort, um, as a different way of really framing it in my mind. Because, I think you're always doing something. I forget what book it was I was reading, but you're always either doing something additive or detracting from your faith, right?
mm.
And so I sat there, and that line really hit me, because you're like, okay, well, if I'm watching Netflix, chances are it's not additive, right? And
Yeah.
so, I think, I'm not in a place like our brother, Taboo, writing books yet, but
He's trying
uh,
to read 100 in a year.
it was something else. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that man has a gift of perseverance. But I think just, um, yeah, really coming to terms with, you know, utilizing, because for me, it's like, okay, well, my wife gets, drained networking. Shit's like it puts her to bed, right? Um, yeah, and for me, I'm like, hey, I could sit here and I could connect 100 people at some cocktail event
Right.
and
All
walk
day.
out feeling jazzed up,
Yes.
and so, I think that's something where it is a form of stewarding the the way God made you.
Yes. I agree wholeheartedly. Now, you mentioned a second taboo, which segues us to community. We just didn't go to a retreat in Africa, but we experienced community and brotherhood. And my question is, well, what stood out to you most about the men you met at Canyon?
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint, because of how unique and wonderful each of these guys is. You know, the kind of profound bombs that Aseka would drop, as my roommate, and I'm like, oh, I was ready to go to bed, and now I can't stop thinking about this. Um, you know, and then Jackie as well is full of wisdom. Steve, who I've stayed in touch with as well, he's someone where he's really looking at the intersection of kind of Christian thought and ideals, and applying that to helping small businesses throughout Kenya and Western Africa. Um, and then having the ride up with Andy and hearing all of his story, that's just, again, um so profound, in that, I mean, you have to think only 1 or 2% of people in this world would be able to endure what he endured
Yeah.
with his family situation, and come out and be the way he is.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, I mean, I was just it was so great to be able to get to know, even if it was a glimpse, get to know all these guys, um and to see that, you know, brotherhood forged in a mutual faith. Um, and, you know, how different scenarios and circumstances we've come from and that we're in now, and yet being able to really connect deeply was wonderful, you know?
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I concur. And then there was cornhole.
You know, we would have had to have been slightly ashamed of ourselves as Americans if we lost, because these guys are like, "What is this?" You know.
So true. So true.
But yeah, you know, some small competitive uh, habits come out.
Yes.
You
Thank
know,
you. Yes.
we but you know, still, it was a wonderful, wonderful time. And you know, going back to Nairobi, um, you know, it's just like and I loved the phrase that Andy told me, because we kind of catch up from time to time as well. And he said to me, he's like, my brother, you keep the time, we make the time.
Yes.
And I was like, man, I love that.
Yes.
uh,
That was the lesson I had to learn my second trip over there.
yeah,
Yeah, nothing moves as fast as we do in America.
yeah. And I think the beauty is, like, you know, I truly feel like, you know, if and when I go back, every single one of those guys is like, come stay with me, come stay with
Yeah.
me, come stay with you. You know, it's just, and it's just so beautiful.
It is. It is. The brotherhood is unique. I haven't traveled as much as you have, but your travels have led you through the business circle. This travel to meet guys who are really yearning for connection even more than we realized we were yearning. They're coming to grips with that as well. And it was a safe place to connect. Even
Hmm.
with all of the uniquenesses and differences and journeys that we've all taken or places that we all live, the experience of just being brothers, sons together. I can't put words to describe it. It's an experience you have to have for yourself to really know the impact of it. Our words will never do it real justice.
Exactly. I think it's you know, hopefully we can pique the interest of more guys. But
Yes.
you know, I think you're 100% right. You have to be there to experience it versus hearing about it, because hopefully we can, you know, make people create such a longing that they feel they have to go. But until you're there, it's really tough to describe the deep change that it can bring on.
Yeah. Amen. All right. So here's our last question for our session. What would you say to someone listening right now, maybe in their midlife or pre midlife experience, who's feeling down, feeling worn, and under the weight of the pressures of work and responsibility, and maybe even wondering about their identity? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I can say God loves you and He's there for you, but more than that, there's something that's so different than knowing and understanding that you have that love there for you and experiencing it in this in these retreats. There's something that's so different being with a group of men who are also in a similar scenario where, you know, there's pressure, there's responsibility, there's challenge, there's things they've overcome. And I cannot expect there being any other type of scenario that can give you more of a resetting, of a kind of reframing of your state of mind and of what's important and of that identity of who you are and who you're meant to be. Um, and I think really, you know, uh, I think especially in the American world, I know 4 days is a lot of the vacation days, right? Sadly. And I
Sadly.
think, I think that even under that, let's assume a 2 weeks off type of scenario over the course of the year, it is 100% worth having 30% of your annual time off because, uh, you know, it for me, it definitely created a space where I can say, you know what, I could have work tomorrow morning and I can kind of think back and reflect on this evening and wake up in the morning feeling a heck of a lot more refreshed than I would going on a cruise, right? So, I think there's all these things that we've been sold about, what is relaxation, what is decompression, what do we need in today's world, and yeah, I mean, look, I think frankly part of it's just putting the phones and the screens away when we go on these things,
For sure.
um, but no, it's I can't. I'm sure you guys have never had one single solitary person who said, "Man, this was a waste of my 4 days."
Quite
Can't
the
be
opposite.
the case. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's good stuff, man. So first, I just want to say thank you, Patrick, for joining us today
Yeah.
on Canyon Pathways podcast as we unpack living like sons to lead like fathers. Only one last request, if you're up for it, would you pray for our listeners, the men out there who are now asking themselves, maybe I need to join a Canyon Pathways retreat.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, dear Heavenly Father, I just pray that you would come to all the men listening here today, and to all the guys who have been on a Canyon Pathways before, that you would just be upon them with your peace and your love, that you would be a shining light in their lives, in their families' lives, in their whatever their situation may be, that you would just really show to them your path, that you would show to them the route that's for them, and you would show them the wealth that is only something that can be experienced through your love. And that you would, yeah, just come to those who need to be uh, with this group of men moving forward, and to create a space for them to live into who you made them to be.
Mm.
Pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. And all you have to do is go to canyonpathways.org and you will find the retreat list of locations, dates, times, and reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. This has been another edition of Canyon Pathways Podcast. I'm your host, Sherman Bradley. And once again, we thank Patrick Rooney for joining us. We are out of here. We'll see you again soon. God bless.
Friends, hope you enjoyed that conversation between Sherman Bradley and Patrick Rooney, two incredible brothers and leaders in the Canyon Pathways community around the world. So grateful for each of them and love what we discovered and unearthed in that conversation. I know I'll be sitting with this episode again to distill even more. Check out the show notes for links as well as PDF with discussion questions if you'd like to use this episode or any of the episodes for ongoing personal reflection or in small group meetings with others. Subscribe so you catch all the episodes as they drop, as we continue to develop a language of sonship through this podcast. Thanks to the team at Maroon Harpoon for producing this episode, and to our donors who make this venture possible. And as always, thank you for being a part of this Canyon Pathways community as we together live like sons and lead like fathers.